Greetings. My name is Gray Andrus. I am a licensed clinical social worker in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Presently, I'm an assistant professor at Missouri Western, which is a small state school north of Kansas City. We have a bachelor's program, and I teach human behavior 1 and 2, policy 1 and 2, child and family welfare class, and practice 3. I've worked with children and families since 1986, including residential care, inpatient psychiatric, and private practice, including in-home care, doing in-home family treatment work, going out to the communities to work with families in their homes. This is part 2 of a 2-part series, which will give you a 1-hour diagnostics CEU. If you haven't done part 1, well, you can pause here and go back and do part 1. It'll take you about 20 minutes, or do part 2 before you do part 1. Feel empowered. The choice is yours. When you're done, please follow the directions to get your CEU. Please download the evaluation for the program. Please share some feedback on how this was helpful or not helpful, what I could have done better, what am I doing well, and then write a 1-page reflection paper or email to us. There are no quizzes on this offering. It is a 1-page reflection. If you cite a source, remember to use APA standards, cite your sources, as I'm going to today in parts 2, as well as I did in parts 1. So, all right, here we go. So empowerment is this process, right, to help a client, right, override their feelings of powerlessness, to help give them the reins, that control. Now, we know the opposite of powerless is powerful, and we know that not all power is positive. In regards to bullying or sexual abuse cases or domestic violence cases, the perpetrator uses power to make their victims feel powerless. But our goal as a clinician is to help our clients feel empowered, right? To take the reins, to solve their own problems, to drive their own car, metaphorically, but in reality. There are some barriers to empowerment. There was 2 that we're going to look at. These are called power blocks. We're going to look at indirect and direct. Indirect power blocks at the micro level, these are negative stigmas that affect our ability to trust, to have empathy, our self-esteem, or cause and effect learning. Anything that affects those could be early in life or later in life. These are going to be indirect power blocks, things that break our ability to trust or our ability to have, empathy for others. Self-esteem, I've always thought, was pretty interesting. Self-esteem isn't just playing soccer because it makes you feel good. It is that connection. It is that ability to do well that helps us grow, to build that self-esteem. Self-esteem begins early on, probably before we're even born, right? When a mother's holding her child and looking down into that child's eyes, and that child looks up in their mother's eyes and sees the reflection of themselves, and they know that they are important, self-esteem is fully functioning and kicking and thriving at that point. But what's blocked our ability? What's damaged our ability to trust others? Frequently, our clients who have mental health issues, they'll struggle with empowerment. They've been called names. They've been ridiculed. Mental health isn't, popular. We put it down. We attack it. We demonize it. Not we, the listener, but we as a society. Some direct power blocks or negative stigmas at the meso and the macro level, at education, healthcare, employment, systemic racism, child welfare. I'll give you an example from Kansas. From 2011 to 2018, the amount of kids entering child welfare in Kansas increased 7% annually for 7 years in a row. That's a cumulative increase of 49% over 7 years. In 2018, 7,129 kids were in child welfare custody. What percentage do you think those were kids of color? The answer may or may not surprise you. It's 75%. In a state that has 5.4% of African Americans, but 75% of 7,000 kids were kids that were brown and black. How does that happen? These are examples of direct power blocks at the meso and the macro level. Again, education, healthcare. I had a colleague from USC who lived in Buffalo, New York, and he was looking at an educational project focused on the grand challenge of ensuring the healthy development of youth. And he shared something in his residency. He said where he lived, a school district had two sides of the railroad tracks. One side were the well-to-do, the other side were the have-nots. The well-to-do side, those kids got to take their textbooks home at night. On the have-not side, the textbooks were chained to the desk. He said that I couldn't even believe that. I said, really, they're chained to the desk? He said, yeah, they're chained to the desk. Kids have to share textbooks. One school district, have-nots, and the well-to-dos. That's an example of direct power blocks at the direct level, at the macro level, that are going to impact our ability to feel empowered. Well, just looking at the social work code of ethics, our code of ethics is based on a series of 6 values. Counselors also have values, as do marriage and family therapists. But looking at 2 of those values is the dignity and worth of a person. As a social worker, we respect the inherent dignity and worth of a person, which means they have value. They bring value to the table. And we value the importance of human relationships. It's all about creating an alliance. This isn't just, like I said, an important value for social workers. It is for counselors and marriage and family therapists as well. Creating the alliance is how we empower our clients. As I shared in part 1, we're looking at our client's lens and their theory of change. Once we understand that theory of change, we're building an alliance. So what works in therapy? Pop quiz. This comes again from Scott Miller and Barry Duncan. Of all the factors affecting treatment outcome, treatment model, technique, or programming is the most important. True or false? What do you think? True or false? The answer is false. Technique makes up the smallest percentage. The key ingredient to outcome is the alliance. We're looking at the research of Wampold here. Again, this comes from Scott Miller and Barry Duncan. The outcomes of treatment is based on the alliance, 30% the allegiance. The allegiance is my adherence to a model, my confidence that I can carry out this model, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or trauma-focused cognitive behavioral or EMDR. And then only 8% is technique. In fact, Miller and Duncan go on to share in their research that all models are about the same level of effectiveness. The key factor is the alliance. Here are some key concepts to the alliance. Number 1, the quality of the alliance is the most prominent predictor of outcomes. Then discipline. Counselors are not better than social workers, which are not better than marriage and family therapists. PhDs are not better than MSWs. And for those professions that think that they are the end all be all, then they're going to struggle with an alliance, because it doesn't really matter what discipline we have. It's about that connection, that valuing that relationship, the dignity and worth of others. Number 2, it's about the client's perception of the alliance, not my perception. How many of you have had that session where you left and you thought, man, that was a good session. I was on fire today. And then the next week you sit down with your client, you ask a few questions connecting back to the previous session, and they can't even remember what you talked about. Or the session where you left and you thought, oh man, this is it. My days as a clinician are over. It's time for me to retire. I don't know what I was doing. And then you see the client the next week and they go, "Oh my God, last week was the best session ever. You so changed my life." And you're thinking, "What did I do? I thought it was the worst session ever." Again, it's not about our perception of that alliance, it's about the client's perception. We want to form a nurturing relationship. Again, that inherent relationship in respecting the client's dignity. That's what gives that empowerment. We want to assist clients in feeling understood through acknowledgement, through acknowledgement. And we meet the clients at their level of functioning. So we take a look at Miller and Duncan's continued research on improving the alliance. So we've looked at the client's theory of change in part one. If you imagine this being a stool, this is propped up by three legs. Number one is the method, which is only 8%, the smallest. What's the meaning or purpose? Does the client have a purpose for being in this session? And we know that clients that are voluntary versus clients that are involuntary can be very different. And then what's the client's view of this therapeutic relationship? Again, it's not about my perception, it is about the client's perception. We want to serve the alliance. We want to be responsive, flexible. We want to validate. We want to legitimize the client's concerns. We want to normalize their feelings. I staffed a case here recently in regards to COVID and the pandemic. The client has a current diagnosis of a generalized anxiety disorder, but it began with an adjustment issue. The social isolation, the restrictions that the pandemic has put on so many of our clients um, has been so overwhelming. And we talked about normalization in that supervision consultation. Everybody is feeling that. We want to work on the client's goals from their theory of change. We want to identify that client's theory of change. So let's go back to a case, looking at the same diagnostic criteria, ADD. I had a case many years ago. I was called in as a consult because the child did not respond well to medication. The child was referred to a psychiatrist for concentration issues. The school felt there was some ADD going on. The psychiatrist put them on a stimulant, and then the child just decompensated. Their behaviors got even more worse, including at one point hiding underneath the principal's desk and taking a pencil onto the eraser end and just erasing their skin until they had an open wound. So I stepped in and met with the team. So it included some teachers, the principal, the placing agent, and the foster parents. Turns out this wasn't a foster child like I had ever experienced before. This was a child that was a victim of the Chernobyl disaster. The child was here in the States for corrective surgery. They were born with a disability, and because of their exposure to radiation prenatal. So they were here for surgery, corrective surgery. They didn't speak English. Going to school was brand new for them. Being in the United States was anxiety for them. Nobody in their foster home spoke their language. This wasn't a concentration issue. This was an adjustment issue. This was a mild trauma issue. Their loved ones were behind in Russia, waiting for them to come home after surgery. And this child knew they were going to have surgery. They had all kinds of anxiety about the surgery. Thus, it all played out in their inability to concentrate. The issue wasn't ADD, it was anxiety. It was the unknown. And we know that the unknown, right, can be a little t trauma. Big T traumas are life threatening traumas, where little t traumas are life altering traumas. The child didn't respond to the stimulant, it made them worse because the issue wasn't ADD. Somehow, the psychiatrist didn't get all this data to make the best assessment for this child. They took the child back to the psychiatrist, gave the psychiatrist the rest of the information, and the psychiatrist took them off of the stimulant, put them on a mild SSRI. We got somebody that spoke Russian to sit down and play with the child. Anxieties came way down. But we had to sit down, we had to listen. We had to empower this client. They're the expert of their lives. This child didn't feel like anyone was listening to them. They felt powerless and helpless and out of control, sitting underneath a desk with a pencil erasing your skin off till you have an open wound. That's feeling out of control. My heart just went out to this kid. I remember when I was interning with Dr. Martha Welch. She was a psychiatrist on the East Coast. She had a formula. She called it the formula for change. This isn't exactly her formula. Her formula was anger plus powerlessness. But in my work with clients, not every client's angry. Some clients are anxious. Anxiety plus powerlessness or hopelessness or helplessness equals a negative behavior. If we just focus on the behavior, we're not really changing the ingredient that led to this behavioral issue. We need to focus on the ingredients. We need to focus on the powerlessness, and to empower our client. Again, one of the number one ways to do that is acknowledgement, is by being present, is by listening. I remember as an adjunct, I had a student that presented in class. I don't know what to do, Gray. This client was involved in a vehicular manslaughter and it's outside my skill set. And I said, were you present? They said, yeah. Did you listen? They said, yeah. I said, that's powerful. That's empowering to be present, to acknowledge, to attend. So some research that I think is really interesting is some research that was done on an ecology unit in Ireland. They looked at giving kids who were getting cancer treatment some ability to make minor decisions. They divided decisions into major and minor. A major decision is like continuing with treatment. That was not an option. These kids had no say in continuing their cancer treatment. But they were given minor decision making, which included when to get their chemotherapy and radiation, what the lights would look like. Would they be in a warm room, a cool room? Would they be in a room with music, a room with TV? What about taking breaks and getting snacks? What would the snacks be? Being able to go down to a playroom on a pediatric unit. Giving the kids some minor decision making empowered them. And what the research saw was that children who felt empowered had decreased fears. They felt more prepared for treatment. They felt more trusting in their caregivers. In addition, there was an increase in their cooperation as a patient and their sense of control. Again, looking at this case example that I presented, this child from Chernobyl feeling out of control, didn't trust anybody, was afraid of the unknown. All of that is little t trauma. I really think this is a great example where shared decision making is empowering. Unfortunately, this is not grounded in child welfare. This is grounded in medical. As I shared in part one, shared decision making isn't a new model. We experience it all the time in our own healthcare, but not so much in child welfare. So part of empowerment is to truly engage our client through active listening. Active listening is divided into 5 skills: attend, acknowledge, invite, summarize, ask. As a client says something powerful, you lean back. They say something meaningful, you lean in. You say, oh, yeah. You change your positions, you nod your head. You're attending, you're acknowledging, you're saying, man, that took so much courage to share that with me. Thank you so much. We invite, we say, tell me more. We give them open-ended questions. We say, tell me more about that. We summarize. Let me make sure I got this straight. If I didn't, please correct me, right? Because the client is the expert. Active listening. This isn't rocket science. It's human theory part 1. It should be a huge part of our diagnostics. So thank you so much for joining me in part 2. If you haven't listened to part one, go back and listen to part one, or listen to the part two first. It's up to you. Be empowered. When you're finished, please download the evaluation, give us some feedback, then take a moment to share in a one-page reflection. Cite your sources like I did today. Um, and thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of this process. I look forward to hearing more about how I can serve you.